My family secretly replaced my 18th birthday with a party for my sister, so I showed up, exposed everything, and watched their reputations crumble. You wouldn't believe what my own family did to me on the day I was supposed to become an adult. I'm Amelia Bennett, 18 years old as of 3 months ago, and I thought I knew what betrayal felt like until that night. I was wrong. Dead wrong. Being Victoria Bennett's little sister meant I'd been competing with a ghost my entire life. A perfect, untouchable ghost, who somehow managed to excel at everything she touched. At 21, she was this radiant communications major at the state university. The kind of person who seemed to float through life collecting achievements like other people collected coffee mugs. Meanwhile, there I was, 3 years younger and perpetually trailing behind, spending countless lonely hours hunched over my sketch pad, or scribbling poetry in worn notebooks that would never see daylight. Victoria existed in this bright social world where everything came naturally. The flawless GPA that never dipped below a 3.8, the handsome boyfriend, who drove a BMW and brought her flowers every Friday, the effortless way she could walk into any room and immediately become its center of gravity. She had this magnetic quality that drew people in, professors and classmates alike, while I remained practically invisible in comparison. Our parents treated her like she was their crowning achievement, their masterpiece they could parade around at neighborhood barbecues and holiday gatherings, watching other adults nod with approval and envy. When Victoria's name came up in conversation, which it frequently did, Mom's entire face would light up with this prideful glow, and Dad would straighten his shoulders like he was personally responsible for creating perfection. Despite everything, I clung to this fragile thread of optimism that refused to break. My 18th birthday was approaching like a distant lighthouse in a storm, this monumental milestone that represented everything I'd been waiting for my entire life. For once, just once, I believed this would be my time to shine, my singular moment to step out from behind Victoria's overwhelming presence and claim a day that belonged entirely to me. This wasn't just any birthday. This was the official transition into adulthood, the symbolic crossing from childhood into independence, and surely my parents would recognize the significance of that. Maybe they'd finally look at me and see someone worthy of celebration, someone more complex and interesting than just Victoria's quirky little sister who hoarded art supplies and wrote terrible poetry instead of going to parties. But as the weeks counted down to my special day, something felt increasingly off-kilter, like the whole house was holding its breath. Every single time I tried to bring up party plans or even casual mentions of my upcoming birthday, Mom would develop this peculiar expression. Her eyes would dart away from mine, and she'd get this tight, almost pained look around her mouth, before abruptly steering our conversation towards safer topics like grocery lists or Victoria's latest academic triumph. Dad's behavior became equally bizarre and telling. The moment I'd start talking about my birthday celebration, he'd suddenly remember some incredibly urgent business call that absolutely couldn't wait, practically sprinting from the room with his phone pressed to his ear. Even Victoria, who normally treated me like an annoying piece of furniture she had to navigate around, seemed to ramp up her coldness to Arctic levels. When I gathered enough courage to ask if she was looking forward to my party, she barely glanced up from her phone, offered the most dismissive shrug I'd ever witnessed, and delivered those chilling words, "We'll see what happens." I should have known something was wrong. The signs were all there, staring me right in the face, but I was too hopeful to see them. Too desperate to believe that my family actually cared about me to notice how they kept avoiding eye contact when I talked about turning 18. 3 days before my birthday, Mom finally sat me down in the kitchen. Her hands were fidgeting with her coffee mug, and she wouldn't look directly at me. "Honey," she said, "we've made reservations at Romano's for Saturday night, 6 o'clock sharp. Don't be late." Romano's was the nicest restaurant in our small town, the kind of place you went for anniversaries and graduations. My heart practically exploded with joy. They were actually going to celebrate me, really celebrate me. I spent the next 3 days planning my outfit, imagining how beautiful everything would be, how proud my parents would look when they toasted their youngest daughter becoming an adult. Saturday arrived and I felt like I was floating on air. I put on my favorite dress, the deep blue one that brought out my eyes, did my makeup carefully, and even curled my hair. I looked in the mirror and for the first time in years, I felt beautiful. I felt worthy of celebration. I arrived at Romano's at exactly 6 o'clock, practically bouncing with excitement. The hostess seated me at a large table for 8, and I sat there waiting, watching the door for my family to walk through. Any minute now they'd arrive with big smiles and maybe even presents. Maybe Victoria would finally tell me she was proud to be my sister. 6:15 came and went. No family. 6:30. I called Mom's phone. Straight to voicemail. 7 o'clock. I tried Dad. No answer. 7:30. Victoria's phone was turned off. By 8 o'clock I was fighting back tears as other diners started staring at me with pity in their eyes. The waitress, a kind older woman named Susan, kept checking on me, her voice getting gentler each time. "Honey, are you sure they're coming?" she asked, and I could see the sympathy written all across her face. I was humiliated. Completely and utterly humiliated. Here I was, dressed up like a princess for a ball that nobody else was attending, the birthday girl sitting alone at a table for 8, checking her phone every 30 seconds like some desperate, pathetic creature. By 9 o'clock, I couldn't take it anymore. I paid for the glass of water I'd been nursing for 3 hours, left a tip for Susan even though I barely had any money, and walked out into the cool evening air. My cheeks were burning with embarrassment, and I could feel the stares of every person in that restaurant following me out the door. The drive home was a blur of tears and confusion. Maybe there had been an emergency. Maybe someone was hurt and they'd rushed to the hospital without thinking to call me. Maybe there was a perfectly reasonable explanation for why my entire family had abandoned me on the most important day of my life. But as I pulled into our driveway, I could see lights on in the house. Not just regular lights. Party lights. Colorful ones strung up around our back patio that I could see from the street. And I could hear music, laughter, the sound of people having a good time. My hands were shaking as I walked up to our front door. I could hear voices coming from the backyard, familiar voices. Mom's laugh, Dad's booming voice telling one of his terrible jokes, and Victoria's voice, higher and happier than I'd heard it in months. I walked around to the back of the house, and what I saw made my blood turn to ice. There was my family. My parents, my sister, and about 15 of their closest friends, all gathered around our patio table that was decorated with balloons and streamers. There was a cake in the center of the table, candles flickering in the evening breeze. Everyone was laughing and talking, wine glasses in hand, having the time of their lives. Without me. Victoria was standing at the head of the table, beaming like she'd just won the lottery. She was wearing a gorgeous red dress that I'd never seen before, her hair professionally styled, looking absolutely radiant. Everyone's attention was focused on her like she was some kind of celebrity. I stood there in the shadows by our garden gate, watching my own family celebrate without me on my birthday, and I felt something inside me break. Not just crack, completely shatter into a million pieces. That's when I heard Dad raise his glass. "To our Victoria," he said, his voice carrying clearly across the yard, "for maintaining her perfect GPA for another semester. We're so proud of everything she's accomplished." Victoria smiled that perfect smile of hers and said, "Thank you all for being here tonight. It means the world to have such wonderful people celebrating with us. Celebrating with us. On my birthday. With money that was supposed to be spent on me." I don't know how long I stood there, watching them toast my sister's grades while I stood alone in the dark, still wearing the dress I'd picked out for my own party. It could have been 5 minutes or 50. Time seemed to stop working properly. Finally, I found my voice. "Interesting party you're having here." Every head turned toward me. The laughter died instantly. Victoria's face went white, and I saw Mom's hand fly to her chest like she was having a heart attack. "Amelia," Dad said, and I could hear the guilt in his voice. "You're home early." "Early from what?" I asked, stepping into the light. "From my birthday party that nobody showed up to? From sitting alone at Romano's for 3 hours waiting for my family who never came?" The silence was deafening. I could see the shock on the faces of their friends, could see the pieces clicking together in their minds. Some of them were starting to look uncomfortable, like they were realizing they were part of something really ugly. Mom stood up, her face flushed. "Honey, we can explain." "Explain what?" I interrupted, and I was surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "Explain how you made reservations for my 18th birthday party and then decided not to show up?" Explain how you took the money you were going to spend celebrating me becoming an adult and spent it on Victoria instead? Victoria finally found her voice. Amelia, don't be dramatic. We just thought. You thought what? I asked, taking another step forward. You thought it would be fun to humiliate me? You thought it would be hilarious to let me sit alone in a restaurant on my birthday while you threw a party for your perfect daughter? Mrs. Henderson from next door was staring at my parents with disgust. Mr. Peterson was shaking his head. I could see the judgment in their eyes, and for the first time in my life it wasn't directed at me. Dad tried to salvage the situation. It wasn't like that, sweetheart. We just thought Victoria's academic achievement deserved recognition, and we could celebrate your birthday another time. Another time? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. It's my 18th birthday, Dad. You don't get another time for that. This was it. This was my one chance to feel like I mattered to you people, and you gave it away. The truth came spilling out then, like a dam had burst inside me. You want to know what's really funny? I actually believed you cared about me. I thought maybe, just maybe, on the day I became an adult, you'd see me as something other than Victoria's disappointing little sister. I spent 3 days planning what to wear, imagining how proud you'd be, thinking about how this would be the night everything changed between us. Tears were streaming down my face, but I didn't care anymore. Instead, you let me sit there alone, checking my phone, making excuses to the waitress about why nobody came to my party. Do you have any idea how humiliating that was? Do you care at all? Victoria stepped forward, and I could see she was crying too. Amelia, I'm sorry. I didn't know they canceled your party. I thought you just decided not to have one. Don't lie to me, I said, my voice sharper than I'd ever heard it. You knew exactly what was happening. You've always known exactly how they treat me compared to you, and you've never said a word about it. I looked around at all the faces staring at me, some horrified, some sympathetic, some just uncomfortable to be witnessing this family destruction. You want to know what I realized tonight? I don't have a family. I have people I live with who share my DNA. But I don't have a family. A real family wouldn't do this to someone they loved. I turned and walked back toward the house, but I stopped at the door. Enjoy your party, I called back. Celebrate Victoria's perfect grades with my birthday money. I hope it was worth it. I went straight to my room and started packing. I didn't have much, but I stuffed everything important into 2 suitcases and a backpack. My art supplies, my journals, my clothes, the few pieces of jewelry that had belonged to my grandmother. Everything that mattered to me, everything that was actually mine. While I packed, I could hear the party breaking up outside. Car doors slamming, voices saying awkward goodbyes. The friends were leaving, probably to go home and tell their own families about the horrible thing they'd witnessed tonight. Around midnight, there was a soft knock on my door. Amelia? It was Mom's voice, small and uncertain. Can we talk? We have nothing to talk about, I called back. Please, honey, let us explain. Explain what? How you've treated me like a second-class citizen my entire life. How you just proved that I'll never matter as much as Victoria. No thanks. I've heard enough explanations. The knocking stopped, but I could hear whispering in the hallway. Mom, Dad, and Victoria, probably trying to figure out how to spin this to make themselves look better. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at my desk and wrote. I wrote about growing up in Victoria's shadow, about always coming second, about the small cruelties and casual dismissals that had shaped my entire childhood. I wrote about the hope I'd had for my 18th birthday and the crushing reality of what had actually happened. But I also wrote about something else. I wrote about how this night had shown me something important. I didn't need their approval to have value. I didn't need their love to be worthy of love. I was 18 years old, legally an adult, and I could choose my own family from now on. When morning came, I posted my story on social media. Not to get revenge exactly, but because I needed people to know what had happened. I needed someone somewhere to acknowledge that what they'd done was wrong. I didn't expect what happened next. Within hours, my story had been shared hundreds of times. Comments poured in from people who had experienced similar treatment from their families, people who understood exactly how I felt. But there were also comments from people who knew my family, people from our community who were horrified by what they'd read. Mrs. Chen from down the street called to invite me for dinner. Mr. Rodriguez from my art class reached out to tell me about a scholarship opportunity he thought I'd be perfect for. Complete strangers were offering support, encouragement, and genuine kindness. But the most important message came from my Aunt Sarah, my mom's sister who lived 3 states away. We'd only met a few times at family gatherings, but she called me that afternoon. "Amelia," she said, and I could hear the emotion in her voice. "I just read your story. I am so sorry, sweetheart. I had no idea your parents were treating you this way." "It's okay, Aunt Sarah," I said, even though it wasn't okay at all. "No, it's not okay. It's absolutely not okay. Listen to me, honey. I want you to come stay with me. I have a spare room and I could use the company. You could finish your senior year here, and I can help you apply for colleges and scholarships." I almost dropped the phone. "Are you serious?" "Dead serious. Your family, real family, and family takes care of each other. Not like this nonsense your parents pulled." That afternoon, while my parents were at work and Victoria was at school, I loaded my car with my belongings and left a note on the kitchen table. It was short and to the point. "I'm going to live with Aunt Sarah. Don't contact me unless you're ready to genuinely apologize and make changes. I'm not interested in explanations or excuses. I'm interested in respect, and until you can offer that, we have nothing to discuss." The drive to Aunt Sarah's house was the longest 3 hours of my life, but also the most hopeful. For the first time in years, I was heading toward people who actually wanted me around. Aunt Sarah's house was small but warm, filled with plants and artwork, and the kind of comfortable clutter that made you feel instantly at home. She met me at the door with a hug that lasted a full minute, and when she pulled back, there were tears in her eyes. "Welcome home, sweetheart," she said, and something inside me that had been broken for years started to heal. Living with Aunt Sarah was like discovering what a real family was supposed to feel like. She asked about my day and actually listened to the answers. She celebrated my small victories and helped me through disappointments. When I showed her my artwork, she didn't compare it to anyone else's or suggest ways I could be better. She just appreciated it for what it was. The scholarship Mr. Rodriguez had mentioned came through. It was for students who had overcome adversity, and my essay about growing up in the shadow of a golden child and finding the strength to choose my own path had apparently resonated with the selection committee. Meanwhile, back home, things weren't going so well for my former family. Word had spread through our small community about what they'd done. Victoria lost several friends who felt uncomfortable with her role in my humiliation. Dad's business took a hit when some clients decided they didn't want to work with someone who could treat their own child so callously. Mom called every few days for the first month, leaving voicemails that ranged from defensive to apologetic to angry and back to apologetic again. I didn't answer any of them. Victoria sent a long text message explaining how sorry she was and how she'd tried to talk our parents out of canceling my party, but I didn't believe her. If she'd really tried to stop it, she would have warned me. The most pathetic attempt at reconciliation came from Dad, who sent me a birthday card 4 months later with a check for $500 and a note that said, "We'd like to make it up to you," as if money could fix the damage they'd done, as if they could buy their way back into my good graces. I donated the money to a local organization that helped kids from difficult family situations and sent Dad a receipt with a note, "Thanks for the donation in your name. I'm sure these kids will put it to better use than I would." By the time my actual graduation day arrived, I'd built a new life for myself. Aunt Sarah and I had become incredibly close. I'd made genuine friends at my new school, people who liked me for who I was, instead of pitying me for who I wasn't. I'd been accepted to art school with a full scholarship, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I had a real future ahead of me. My parents drove 3 states to attend my graduation. They sat in the back of the auditorium looking uncomfortable and out of place. Victoria came too, wearing a dress that was probably more expensive than my entire outfit, trying to look remorseful. After the ceremony, they approached me hesitantly. Mom's eyes were red like she'd been crying, and Dad looked like he'd aged 5 years in the past few months. "Amelia?" Mom said, her voice shaky. "We're so proud of you. You look beautiful up there." "Thank you," I said politely, the way I'd talk to acquaintances. "We've made mistakes," Dad said, jumping in like he'd rehearsed the speech. "Big mistakes. We want to fix things between us. We want you to come home." I looked at the 3 of them standing there, and I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, no longing for what might have been. Just a kind of empty neutrality, like they were strangers asking for directions. I am home, I said simply. Aunt Sarah is my family now. She's the one who believed in me, supported me, celebrated my achievements. She's the one who showed me what real love looks like. Victoria stepped forward, tears streaming down her face. Amelia, please. I miss you. I miss my sister. You never had a sister, I replied, not unkindly but with complete honesty. You had a convenient target for comparison, someone to make you look better by contrast. But you never treated me like a sister. That's not true, she protested. Isn't it? When's the last time you asked me about something I cared about? When's the last time you stood up for me when Mom and Dad were dismissing my interests or achievements? When's the last time you treated me like I mattered? She opened her mouth to respond, then closed it again. We both knew the answer. I forgive you, I continued, and I meant it. All of you. I forgive you because holding on to anger was poisoning me, and I refuse to let you have that power over my life anymore. But forgiveness doesn't mean I'm going to pretend this never happened, and it doesn't mean I want you back in my life. Mom made a choking sound. But we're your family. No, I said, looking over at Aunt Sarah, who was waiting patiently by the parking lot, giving us space but staying close enough to support me if I needed it. She's my family, the people who choose to love me unconditionally, who celebrate my successes without making me feel guilty for having them, who support my dreams instead of dismissing them. Those are my family. I turned back to my parents and Victoria. I hope you learn from this. I hope you figure out how to love people without conditions, how to celebrate someone without diminishing someone else. But I'm not going to wait around for that to happen. I have a life to live, and I'm going to live it surrounded by people who actually want me there. I walked away from them then, toward Aunt Sarah, toward my new life, toward a future where I didn't have to earn love or compete for attention. As we drove away from the graduation, I saw them in the side mirror, standing there in the parking lot looking lost and confused. I felt sorry for them, but I didn't feel sorry for me. Not anymore. That was 3 months ago. I'm starting art school in the fall, living in a dorm room that I decorated with my own paintings and photographs from my new life. I've made friends who appreciate my weird sense of humor, and my tendency to see beauty in unexpected places. I'm dating a guy named Marcus, who thinks my art is amazing and has never once compared me to anyone else. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if my family had just shown up to my birthday party that night. If they'd celebrated me the way they celebrated Victoria. If they'd made me feel valued and loved. Would I have stayed? Would I have continued accepting their scraps of attention and calling it love? I think I would have, and that terrifies me. Because staying would have meant continuing to shrink myself to fit into their narrow definition of worthiness. It would have meant spending my whole life trying to be someone I wasn't, someone who could finally earn their approval. Instead, their cruelty set me free. Their rejection forced me to find people who didn't need me to be perfect to love me, who didn't need me to diminish myself to make them comfortable. My 18th birthday was supposed to be the day I became an adult, but it turned out to be something even more important. It was the day I learned that family isn't about blood or shared DNA or legal obligations. Family is about choice, about showing up for each other, about celebrating each other's light instead of trying to dim it. I still have the dress I wore to Romano's that night, hanging in my closet at Aunt Sarah's house. Sometimes I look at it and remember the girl who put it on with such hope, such desperate need for approval. I feel sorry for her, but I'm also grateful to her. She was brave enough to sit alone in that restaurant for 3 hours. Brave enough to confront her family when she found them celebrating without her. Brave enough to walk away from people who didn't deserve her. She didn't know it at the time, but she was saving my life. I don't need my parents' love anymore. I don't need Victoria's approval. I don't need to be anyone's golden child or live in anyone's shadow. I have Aunt Sarah, who loves me fiercely and unconditionally. I have friends who choose me every day. I have teachers who believe in my talent and my potential. But above all else, the most precious thing I've discovered in this journey is my authentic self. The person I was always meant to be beneath all those layers of desperate people-pleasing and self-doubt. I'm no longer that broken girl who twisted herself into impossible shapes, trying to become whatever version she thought might finally earn her family's scraps of affection. The woman I am now creates art that speaks to people's souls. pieces that hang in coffee shops and small galleries where strangers stop to really look, to feel something deep and true. I've learned to plant my feet firmly when someone tries to walk all over me, to use my voice as a weapon against injustice, to set boundaries that protect my peace without apology. I choose kindness because it reflects who I want to be in this world, not because I'm afraid of conflict or desperate for approval. But I've also learned that kindness doesn't mean letting people use me as their personal doormat. There's strength in gentleness, but there's also power in knowing when to say no. I've come to understand one of life's most bitter but liberating truths. Sometimes the greatest gift toxic people can give you is to reveal their true nature so completely, so undeniably that you have no choice but to see them clearly and choose something infinitely better for your life. My name is Amelia Bennett. I'm 18 years old, and I'm finally truly free. My family abandoned me on my birthday, but in doing so, they gave me the greatest gift of all. They gave me permission to find people who actually deserve me, and I did.